Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first ever GwenTalk. My name is Apero. I will be your host today. Co-hosting with me is the amazing LB Dutchboy, and our first guest today will be McBeard. How is everyone today? Dutchboy, how are you doing first?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you for the generous introduction, and I'm happy to be here with some awesome guests.
Absolutely. McBeard, thank you so
Hi.
much for coming on our first ever show. We're so excited to have you. How are you?
No, thank you. No, this is it's a real honor to be the first guest on the show, and I was just kind of basking in the nice little production that Mark Theus is putting together, and very nice show. Thanks, no, really, thanks
That's
for having
right.
me as the first guest. I really appreciate it.
Yes, and McBeard does raise a very, very important point. Thanks have to go immediately before we begin to Team Aretuza, and especially to Mark Theus, the newest member of Team Aretuza, who has put together this entire production. So thank you to him. So before we begin, let's talk a little bit about the format. Most people will probably be familiar with Top Decked. That was the last Gwen show, which sadly ended a few weeks ago. We have a slightly different format that we'll be using here on GwenTalk. So just to explain how that will work, we actually are going to have two guests today. Our other guest, Gnurrgard, will be with us shortly. We will be starting with a small interview and chat with the lovely McBeard. Then we'll have a little break and we'll have a little feature video from another Team Aretuza member, Green Cricket. And then we will be talking to Gnurrgard for another 10 to 15 minutes and moving into a big group discussion to end the show. And that will include viewer questions. So that's how it's all kind of gonna work. Just for everyone who might be wondering how's the show gonna kind of get along. So let's hop straight into it. And McBeard, can you just introduce yourself to anyone who might not be familiar with you? I don't know how anyone could not be, but tell us, please.
Oh no, I mean, I don't know. There may be somebody out there who does not know who I am, but that's cool. Hi, I'm McBeard. I am the host and producer of the Commander's Horn podcast, and I am part of the Gwent Masters casting team. You find me many months doing Gwent events, Gwent Opens, Gwent Challengers, as well as mostly weekday streaming, 4 or 5 days a week on my channel, as well as YouTube stuff. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So
I do a lot of Gwent stuff. I've been doing Gwent stuff for a while.
You do a lot of Gwent stuff. So people
Yeah.
will know your face and your voice probably from a lot of the official CDPR matches. And of course, from Commander's Horn, your podcast. Can you tell us, just to begin with, tell us a little bit about Commander's Horn?
I mean, I started the podcast when, basically the August of the year that the closed beta came out, which was in October. I started the podcast in obviously weeks and weeks beforehand to start working on a podcast for Gwen. So I started that kind of in my kitchen, and it kind of grew from there, and I did it every week, and that's kind of how I got a profile in Gwen. And it's been long running. We just did episode 83 on Tuesday, and we're going to do episode 84 live from Wild Hunt Philadelphia on Friday the 15th of June this week. And it's been awesome. I get to meet and speak with some of the best players and personalities in Gwent. It's been a pretty cool ride so far.
Speaking of which, there is actually a bit of a prior connection here, is there not? One of your guests?
Prior connection. Well, Dutchboy has been on the podcast. That is for sure. So yes.
That's right.
It's good to talk to Dutchboy again. Of course, we met at Gwent Open number 4.
Yes.
3 or 4? It's 4, I think. Yeah.
4. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Still can't sleep about the finals, semifinals.
Oh yeah, well.
So yeah, Dutchboy is going to be my co-host this week. Dutchboy, do you want to maybe, just since it's the first episode, do you want to also just give a quick rundown of your background?
So my name is LB Dutchboy, otherwise known as Liam Brouwer, if you just want to do it a little bit normal. I am familiar in the Gwent scene because of my semi-final performance from the Gwent Open, and I've been playing in Team Aretuza now for a bit, and have had some other card game experience with Hearthstone before that, traveling to China and all across Europe.
Very nice, very nice. All right, and when I remember when Dutchboy went on your show, McBeard, there was a little hiccup in terms of maybe some language being used.
What? I don't remember that exactly, but I'm sure that, I don't know, every now and then, we try to do the podcast kind of PG, but every now and then, I think the rule of PG-13 is you can swear once, right? Isn't that every movie? That's a North American thing. I don't even know if you know what PG-13 is.
We'll roll with it.
Yeah. It's, you can let a few words slip through. It's okay.
A few.
Yeah, a few.
You just keep on my tongue. But Going back into Gwent, for me, McBeard has actually been a very familiar face since the starting of Gwent. I remember actually seeing you cast the Noxious versus Life Coach finals from the Challenger. And that was kind of the start for me for Gwent and getting into it competitively, seeing how well everything was organized, and which was just absolutely amazing. But how did you actually start with Gwent? Where did you start your adventure?
My adventure with Gwent, really, I just kind of started with the podcast. It started with, as many people had in Witcher 3. That's where most of the adventures started with Gwent, I think, for a lot of people. But I've played card games in the past before. I played Magic the Gathering. I've played Hearthstone in the past as well. And I've explored some of the ones in between, like Duelist and a couple others. And so I like card games generally. I've always been a big fan of. And so when Gwent was having a standalone, I'm like, this is awesome. I love The Witcher and I love card games. And this looks like they're going to put a lot of effort into it. So I basically got involved as soon as possible. Because I wanted to be I wanted to be part of the community and I wanted to make content. And, I was kind of in between jobs at the time. So I had extra time to do that. That's really important, I think, if you want to make content.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just started playing Gwent. There was some early tournaments for beta. I actually won 2 of the first 3, I think. And the second one was actually won by Swim. And I think I met Swim in the finals of that tournament.
Wow.
This is in like November of 2016. So I was pretty good then. At that time, I felt like it's pretty good. And I stayed fairly competitive until the opportunity for casting came up. And then I kind of shifted my efforts a little bit to doing that. And I don't know, it's been awesome. And Gwent's been great. And I've been there through every single change. And I'm looking forward for more changes.
Wonderful. Yeah, speaking of changes, wonderful segue. Let's talk a little bit about Homecoming. Now, just in the last week or two, we've kind of had a few leaks come through. Obviously, the 2 rows thing has been discussed for a few weeks now. But also now it seems like they say CDPR is playing with the idea or testing the idea of only having 2 bronze cards per deck. So this is obviously a bit of a bombshell. What were your initial reactions to that, McBeard?
This one's for me? Okay.
Yeah.
When I heard about that, I thought a lot about kind of the structure of Gwent in general, like the deck building. And basically, it made me think, obviously, a lot about Serie Nova, because Serie Nova decks have that limitation of having only 2 copies of a bronze card in your deck for 16 bronze cards. And Serie Nova, is a great card and it's a bad card at the same time. I think that everybody who likes Serie Nova for the same reason, in that it makes diverse decks and archetypes that need the support actually function around this giant bomb you can drop at the end of the game. Unfortunately, and that gives you the reach and the strength to actually play that archetype, and it actually makes some things competitive where they maybe wouldn't be. Unfortunately, every Serie Nova deck wins the same way and kind of always angles towards having that way to drop Serie Nova last to win the game. So it opens up the game, but it also waters it down at the same time because it's very homogenized. So that was the problem of building it. But the thing about, if you play a lot of Nova decks like I do, you find that consistency is lower. So you have to make concessions here and there, and you have to kind of build in certain engines to make sure that your deck can flow. You also lose any good cards that function as 3-ofs. Like, I don't know, we use Imperial Golems as an example, let's say. You want to have as many of those as possible in your deck. So you can't run like Neckers, let's say, because you probably want more than 2 of them. You can't run a lot of cards like that. So it makes them less consistent, but that means that all decks would get less consistent if all decks had 2 bronze cards only, which means that the draw would probably end up being the most RNG heavy thing in Gwent from there on, because consistency would become the most important thing.
Absolutely. I think the interesting thing is really when you think about the idea of having only 2 bronze cards per deck, you really have to assume that a lot of other changes will come alongside that. Because as you say, if you lose that consistency in your deck, if you lose those cards that hold the deck together, or you minimize the amount of cards you can have that can hold the deck together, then there are sacrifices that are made in terms of consistency and predictability. So the question is really, how will the cards and or the game be balanced to make 2 cards actually work? I mean, do you just, hypothetically, what would you do? Would you just add more cards that have more synergies together? Or how does one hypothetically deal with that situation to create synergistic decks?
I mean, there's so many hypotheticals, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't really know. We don't really know what like activated abilities might be. We don't know what the row bonuses might be, or what the different effects the rows may have carried innately. We don't know what the coin flip fix is. We don't know what if anything comes in place of removing spies. So obviously, mechanically, there's so much different stuff. Like we don't know how much card draw there is. We don't know if tutors or musters are going to be as prevalent, because they definitely will be less prevalent, because you wouldn't play a muster card like Aretuza with just two of them. You'd always want to play three of them. So cards like that would probably never be played, and they probably wouldn't make those cards, because unless they were very strong, like two units that came together, like I guess what Botchling and Lubberkin are always trying
I was
to do.
about to say, like the good old Botchkin and Lubberkin.
So there's so many things that are probably going to change that it really becomes hard to even like hypothesize. But what I do know is that, I look at, let's say, Nova's kind of like, I look at monsters, right? You play Nova with Dagon generally because you don't mind playing Foglets, because they're, good cards that come out of your deck and thin your deck in a Nova deck, and Dagon can trigger those things. I guess Aridin can as well, but with the Navigator pulling another unit out. But you try to find ways to build those things into your deck, because you don't really want to run 26 cards. You want to get those cards out of your deck. So are there still going to be those cards in Gwent that are going to be coming out of your deck and never from your hand? So like, I imagine if they are, those cards are going to be very popular in a format where you need to have two bronzes. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around it.
Yeah, I know. I feel the same way. And like there have been questions as well about, for example, how weather works with two rows, and whether they end up having a passive function or rather than a rolling function or something like that. So I mean, there's plenty of different ways in which this could change. But yeah, okay, cool. Dutchboy, did you have any thoughts before we?
Yeah, I'm actually kind of curious, because McBeard actually hit the spot perfectly with the change from 3 to 2 with the consistency and the tutors, how they will change that. But I am actually just curious myself, what do you like where they're working towards this more having less consistency in the game necessarily, but more, let's say, like difference in games than just playing the same game over and over again, having the same actions coming on?
I mean, both of those things are really important. Obviously, you want to have games be varied, because that, for anybody who grinds, that varied gameplay is more interesting than just, having a meta maybe defined by 2 or 3 very strong decks. So I think that bringing down the consistency of all decks is going to probably increase the kind of matchups you're going to see. Because the thing about the really, really good decks of the past, and I think Nilfgaard Spies is like maybe the best example throughout the ages. Nilfgaard Spies basically saw every card it needed to see every game. It saw everything. It never really failed in drawing those things, generally because it could thin so hard with Emissary, and it could draw so well, and it kind of customized its draws later with Asira and Village of Forts and Calvet, unless you were playing Emir. But the same thing, you're playing Kalok twice. You're like basically getting everything out of your deck, Roach, all of it. So that was a very, very strong deck for a very long time, because you knew exactly what you were going to get every single game. And that's why it was so strong. So if you take that level of strength away from decks, Skellige's been doing this for a long time as well. Ultra, ultra thin decks, so they can always get their finishers. And those decks are really strong, generally because, if you make cards dead for Skellige, it really hurts. You make a dead Corsair, or you make it so the pirate can't pull something, or whatever you want to do. When you take consistency away, you basically you find new ways to win against decks that generally get to play out their strategy completely. And I think that it's just going to vary the meta, but it is going to make the draw more important.
Yeah, so I guess there's always hit and miss, huh? And I guess it's hard for us to talk about, because on the one hand, I'm sure we all kind of love what Gwent is and has been so far. So the thoughts of it all kind of changing so dramatically is on the one hand very upsetting, but on the other hand, you just don't know until it comes out. You don't want to assume it's going to be bad as well. So you kind of gotta just be patient, and I think that's the hardest thing. Let's talk a little bit about the meta at the moment. Is there anything that you're noticing, McBeard, just quickly? Is there any deck maybe that you think has gone a little bit what's unnoticed, I suppose, which might be having a bit of a renaissance in this meta?
Oh, like a deck that's basically that's come back now that the biggest players got nerfed. I mean, I think Northern Realms is in a very kind of murky spot right now, but that's probably more so for ladder play.
Yeah.
Although one player did bring Hensel to the Red Dragon. I saw that in the finals at least. So That's interesting. I got to watch that match again. But I know that you probably you can see if you're going to encounter Northern Realms, you can encounter anything. So I feel like that's for the most part. I mean, up until you get to the top, probably where it's pretty much still refined down to the best decks. But I know Shoop Scoia'tael is doing very well.
Yes.
I think Skellige still has like a bunch of different ways that are still really, really good. And I'm glad that that stayed intact for Scoia'tael, or sorry, for Skellige, because I think that's what like a balanced meta should always go for. Like all the factions should have the options that Skellige and to some respects Nilfgaard have, I guess. Whereas Scoia'tael and Skellige and Northern Realms are probably still sort of very edged on what might be the strongest deck to play. Although Northern Realms, I think that the jury's still out. I think that there needs to be a bit more exploration done these days. But yeah, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of everything at the moment. Of course, there's lots of Deathwish, there's lots of Consume, and there's lots of kind of the Imlerith Deathwish hybrid thing that's out there as well. So
I'm seeing a surprising amount of reveal has actually been coming out. I don't know if you've noticed this as well, but
I thought that was just kind of like ladder stuff, early season stuff, because reveal always kind of creeps like, hey, is it okay to play? But I mean, it seems every time I run into that early season bump of like, boy, there's a lot of reveal out there. Every time it seems like they're coming back stronger and stronger. Like these players are like refining their way to attack early on.
Exactly. Now, just quickly, let's talk a little bit about Wild Hunt 2. You seem very excited. So why don't you give us a little spiel? What's it about? The first one was obviously a huge success. Everyone had such a great time, and I remember tuning in on what it must have been like 1 a.m. on a Saturday night here in Europe, and it was just going off. So tell us a little bit about how that went last time and what's different this time.
Okay, so there was actually, it was a huge success, Wild Hunt 1, but there was one shortcoming that everybody couldn't deny, and that's, we really don't want to do a 14.5-hour cast this time. So we put our heads together and we came up with this brilliant idea. Let's do it in 2 days, like every other Gwent. So we're going to do 2 days of Gwent. It's going to be things get started on the Friday, June 15th. I'm doing a live Commander's Horn at the venue. There's going to be some fun stuff to do in person. We might do some live streaming. There's going to be like a live Gwent demonstration with like the actual physical cards, like from these. I don't know if you can't really see like the actual expansion packs from The Witcher. So Amherst from the Lodge of Sorceresses is bringing like a full wooden like board. And there's going to be like a bunch of fun stuff for people
to giveaways and that kind of stuff, isn't it? Yeah.
But as far as like Twitch broadcast stuff, I know for sure Commander's Horn is going to be live at some point Friday evening on the East Coast of North America. And then the show gets started on the 16th and 17th. We're going to do a Swiss phase on the 16th for Gwent. And that's going to be, we're going to determine the seeding for the finals, which will be the following day on the 17th on Sunday. I am casting, Joe Snow is casting, Swim is casting, Flake is hosting. Marthius is going to be there as well. He's got everything kind of in the production side, and of course there's lots of admins. No Control, Amers is an admin, Thrilling is going to be there as well for a lot of the organization. So shout out to all the people that are involved in Wild Hunt. You guys are awesome. And I'm leaving on Thursday on the 14th to go to Philadelphia and get things set up, and we're just looking forward to a nice thorough, rich, and diverse tournament in Gwent like the first Wild Hunt was. And the first Wild Hunt fell in between metas as well. Like I know Red Dragon showed us some stuff for sure, and I think that that's going to be a little bit of a peep into what you can expect as far as competitive Gwent goes from here now until I guess Homecoming. But this will also be another little peek into seeing what people were teching with, because you might be able to get to see the first look at something that ends up having a strong meta presence from there on.
Very nice. All right. Thank you so much, McBeard. We're going to give you a little break while we go to Green Cricket's video, and then we'll be talking, ladies and gentlemen, with the lovely Gnurrgard from Team Complexity Card Gaming. But first, enjoy this video. McBeard will see you really soon.
All right. Thanks.
Hey Gwent players, Green Cricket here, and welcome to our first Gwent card spotlight. The cards we cover here are either very underrated, they don't see a lot of play, or they have some exciting mechanics or ways to play them. For today's card, we need to journey south to Gnurrgard into the dungeons of the mighty empire of Nilfgaard. Once, Xathisius was an astrologist highly respected by Emir by Emrys for helping him to lift the curse he was burdened with. However, fellow mages and sorceresses didn't take him for full and whispered fortune teller behind his back. But they didn't know how right they were, because Xathisios was indeed able to read a lot through the positioning of stars, and where the mage's magic had failed, he was able to locate the position of Ciri within 100 miles, which is a feat all the others weren't able to provide. Sadly for him, Ciri managed to escape from that area before the Emperor's troops arrived there, so no one could confirm that Xathisios was correct, which earned him a free trip to the cold dungeons as a reward for his incompetence. In Gwent, his ability is similar because it enables you to look through the enemy's deck and pick one card to put on the bottom. Especially in an established meta, this ability can win you the game by telling you what's left in your enemy's deck and which cards they have on their hands. Typically, decks don't differ too far from each other. For example, if an enemy has 2 Greatswords still left in the deck and there's a Battle Maiden missing, then you may be able to deny the Greatsword setup by killing their first Greatsword right away to deny Battle Maiden a target. Or you can check if Coral is still in the deck, so you can safely play your engines without fear for an artifact compression. Reading not only the enemy's deck, but also concluding what's in their hand can be very powerful. But Xathisios doesn't stop there, because he does not only give us insight, he lets us choose a card which we want to put at the bottom of the deck. We could either use this to prevent the lose condition from happening, like putting Mandrake, Coral, Igni or such onto the bottom, or we could disturb the enemy's gameplay, giving them a harder time to access the win conditions like Kahir, Freyas, Darren, and so on. And playing Xathisios after the enemy played Stefan's Keln should be one of the more rewarding moments of Gwent. I hereby challenge you to use Xathisios more often, and I'm looking forward to your comments. Maybe you even have an idea for the next card spotlight. And now back to Apero and LB Dutchboy.
Okay, welcome back everyone, and welcome especially to our latest guest, Gnurrgard. He is one of the founding members of the Gwent segment, I suppose you'd call it, of Complexity Card Gaming. How are you today, Gnurrgard?
I'm feeling great today. I had the day off, I just did nothing today and it's great.
Wonderful. So for those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about you and your background with Gwent? How did you get started? How did it all happen?
As many people, I started actually coming from Hearthstone when I was kind of disgruntled with Gadgets on. I don't know if many people know the expansion, but it was really bad. So I didn't want to play anymore. And then like Super JJ, Life Coach, and Noxious, all 3 people from the Hearthstone community I really liked. They transitioned over to Gwent, and I took a look at it, and I really liked it because it was like had no mana system, was very consistent, and that's the stuff I really like because I also have a background in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where there's also no mana and very consistent game, and I really like it. Still like it to this day.
Okay, wonderful. And then so tell us, with Complexity Card Gaming, who are they and what do they do, and why go into Gwent now? Answer all 3 of them if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so I already touched on Yu-Gi-Oh! CCG is the leading physical card game team, and like games like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, and Force of Will. We have like several national European champions and also world champion in Force of Will. And yeah, they went into Gwent because as many of you know, like I was in Top Deck before, and Top Deck kind of like doesn't exist anymore. And so that was in the middle of our tournament preparation for Fanderman for the Gwent Open, and that really hit us like teams gone. So I didn't want to leave Fanderman hanging, so I just said, okay, we'll still do this preparation. We will prep you for this tourney, and it really went well, and I really liked working with the team. So I just asked them, hey, I kind of like continuing this work. How about you? And then I got feedback from Fanderman, Colemone, and all the people in the team said, yeah, same for me, honestly. So then my good friend Doba, he's the catalyst in all of this. He made an offer to Complexity Card Gaming. He has contacts with from his Yu-Gi-Oh! Days. And he said, hey, look, here's a hardworking team that already has like established players and people that know stuff about Gwent. And they look for someone to structure, basically. Like, and that's what they offered us. Like, they have a website, they have graphic designers. We don't have to worry about all that stuff. We just do our thing. And yeah, that's basically what they told us. So,
Nice.
Yeah, and then we talked about it internally, like the whole group, and came to the conclusion that it's a great idea to
Wonderful.
cooperate.
Yeah, so obviously Dutchboy and I are familiar with Team Aretuza, you know, that being that we're on that team. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about how do teams help you? Like what do teams do aside from just having someone to talk to on the weekend? You know, what does what does it give us that we don't find just by chatting to each other?
Well, from my point of view, it's like of course the competitive teams. So there's a lot of exchange about how's the meta developing right now. For example, me when I'm studying or working, I can't play Gwent, but there's other people playing Gwent at the time, so we can just exchange or have some people that help us like scrimming for tournaments, like actually good players that we can play against instead of just jumping on the ladder and running into anything like any matchup, any player.
Do you mind if I stop you for just 1 second? Because obviously we know what this means, but could you explain maybe to those at home what does scrimming mean? What is scrimming?
Scrimming is basically a friendly match between two friends or teammates, and hopefully both. That where you just beforehand just say what decks you're gonna bring. Say I want to test like alchemy versus greatswords, and I want alchemy to be on blue coin. So then you play the game, restart the match until alchemy blue coin, then you play it out, so that you get like in a controlled environment, get information about these matchups.
Very nice. So that's one of the things, one of the ways in which you can kind of have that information going into a tournament as to maybe not only what decks you're strong and weak against, but also what decks you want to play on red or blue. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. One thing that was very outstanding was when we prepped Fenderman and he like played against Colomon, and he said, okay, this matchup is completely different when you're playing against the pro. That was really funny.
You tried not to take that personally. Great. And Dutchboy, I mean, you've also come over to Team Aretuza not that long ago now, a few months ago. But what do you think is the benefit of teams? Just while I'm picking your brain.
Well, personally, I always love playing together in card games and just games in general. I think that if you want to get better at the game, the most important thing is to just have fun. And if you're playing with other guys that you actually enjoy playing with and you know that they're actually decent at the game, you can talk with them, learn more about the game, and also learn a bit about each other and laugh with together. And that way you keep playing and actually enjoy the game for more amounts of time.
Absolutely. And then I guess, of course, it's also getting everyone together for joint projects. We've also seen Gnurrgard, Team Leviathan Gaming has also come on board recently for Gwent. What do you have a theory as to why it is that suddenly these Gwent teams are turning up? Obviously, in your case, it was the lack of team top deck or the dismissal, the destruction. What's the word I'm looking for? Destruction's not right. No.
Just drop the bomb.
That's not what I meant. You know what I mean. When dismantling. Thank you. Disbanding of top deck. That was obviously part of the driver for you to find a new team. But why do you think now is the time for teams to come up in Gwent?
I think for Team Leviathan is similarly because like top deck disbanding was like opened up a huge opportunity for other teams because they did so much for the community. They kind of held a monopoly over this, and now that this is gone, it's like there are a lot of players still that were in top deck that still don't have a team yet, or just lack of content too, because top deck doesn't do this anymore. And it's kind of an opportunity for other teams to like establish themselves. It's like what we also want to do, like use this time to establish ourselves.
Exactly, and that kind of draws us into our last point, which is about the content drought. Now, obviously, there are many ways in which a content drought or the lack of information or new cards, new archetypes, etc., coming in like the next few months is a negative thing for some teams. But I think what you've touched on is a really interesting point in that it could also provide opportunities. Which way do you see it? Do you see it as a good thing for teams or as like a challenge for teams to overcome?
I mean, as all things, it's like has pros and cons. Of course, it's like if you get updates, then you have more things to evaluate, which is very fun and also good. But if you have a long period of the same meta, you can also go way more in depth on that topic. And that's what I'm currently doing is like, because we already know what the meta is, what's shaping up to be, and well, not completely, but that's for later. But we already know a lot of stuff about the meta basically, and that way we have the time to go deeper into the topic of like the roots of Gwent, like how does Gwent work, like generally, not in the scope of this matter. And that's what I really like to do. So for me, as the head of the competitive team, it's for me it's no issue that there's no content for now. Also, we have like I think monthly tournaments, so I always have my hands full. I'm just jumping from one prep to another.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's leave it there for now. We're going to see a quick video, and then we're going to go into our group discussion, and we're going to talk a lot of different stuff. So let's do that, and we'll see you all really shortly. All right, we are back, and we are into our group discussion. So welcome back, McBeard, to the conversation. Hi, how you doing?
Oh, I'm very well.
Oh, I think a lot has changed in the last 15 minutes. So, all right, so let's jump straight in. Let's talk a little bit about the patch that we just had. We obviously had a few nerfs and buffs. We had the removal of Create from bronze cards in particular, Slave Driver, Elven Scout, these kinds of things. McBeard, any surprises in there? Are there any cards you wouldn't have wanted to see nerfed that were?
I mean, I still kind of feel like maybe Winch didn't have to get that change and Henselt could have been changed. But I mean, it's just probably if you're targeting the whole package of Create cards that people had an issue with, it's maybe safer to do it like this, I suppose. And I guess you can still do some like weird operator stuff, I guess, if you really wanted to meme around with Henselt. But I think that the changes were fine. I think that Elven Scout actually does have a place in some decks, and I think that Slave Driver is actually awesome for Gnurrgard because of how well he works with Emir, and how well he would work with Decoy, and just running a deck that runs both of those cards right now is just fun for me. It's probably my favorite Gnurrgard deck to run with like Slave Drivers and stuff, Alchemists, Golems and stuff. It's good.
Nice. Gnurrgard, what do you think? How do you feel about the latest patch?
I really like most of it. Like everything that was problematic before, War Dancer and Create, Slave Drivers, Elven Scouts, something that most of people didn't like, got changed, and rightfully so. Also, Henselt got his nerf just by Winch, not touching like Henselt and absolutely destroying the deck thereby. Also, what I was pleasantly surprised about is the nerf on Olgierd, because I was always saying before that if War Dancer gets nerfed, they have to touch Olgierd too, because they basically doing the same thing. And yeah, they actually touched on it, and they nerfed Olgierd. They changed it, and yeah, I think that was pretty good. But
it was funny. Oh, sorry, go on.
Morkrock is still in the game, but I think it's like a lot more counterable than both War Dancer and Olgierd. So
yeah, I loved the initial reaction to Olgierd was like, okay, let's make a consume deck over this. Like, let's make this work. And of course, we saw that amazing bug where the moonlight keeps hitting the weak into Olgierd, and we had all.
I'm glad they fixed that too. I'm glad that was like, whoops.
That was amazing. But it didn't really catch on, did it? The Olgierd getting a place in consume decks.
Nope. I think it's like unnecessary, because if you're already rolling, then why would you eat Olgierd when you can eat Makers? Like 20 points out of it, then just 5.
Yeah, I agree. If you already got your combo off, you already have a million points. You don't need another million to win the game.
Yep.
But I do find it funny that with the nerfing of Winch, as you said, McBeard, Henselt, you said, oh yeah, if you want to meme around with Henselt, and I never thought I would hear that sentence. You know?
Well, I mean, when I say like specifically like create more than 3, like make it so Henselt can pull more than 2 machines.
Yeah. No, I know.
Situation is what I meant to say. I mean, Henselt is probably still like, well, I mean, I don't know what you guys think. How do you guys feel about Hensel right now? Do you guys think it's Northern Realm's best option still, or do you think the Northern Realm?
Oh,
Because we saw
I
that-
think
what was
we've actually got a question.
We're going to talk about that, right? Because Red Dragon, we
yeah.
saw Hensel in Red Dragon, and
I
wasn't sure
gonna
if
say.
Hensel was going to
Yeah.
be the Northern Realms candidate. I think I wasn't really sure as when the nerfs hit.
Yeah, well, yeah. Speaking of Red Dragon tournament, there was actually something really interesting, which of course we saw. Actually, professional players, so the ones who were not playing at the time, were actually casting the tournament. So I was, I don't know if you all got a chance to watch at the weekend. I thought it was great. I actually really liked some of the insight that we got. Obviously, they're not professional casters. That's clear. That's fine. But I think they all did a really good job with it. What did you find was maybe interesting or different about the Red Dragon tournament?
From the casting, I really liked Damorkis casting because I think like the way he casted is you like notice that he's a pro ladder player. Like he like saw lines that you usually don't think about if you're not playing pro ladder, and that was really cool for me to watch. Just having his like pro ladder player actually like talking through the game.
Yeah. It's something I also suggested that the Gwent Open forum when I was there to Bursa, to have like one of the players actually co-cast with an like professional caster, so that the professional caster can keep on their amazing job and like just can get the show rolling, but like have the pro players actually come with the insights that are sometimes hard to spot when you're casting and trying to do everything.
McBeard, you're the pro here.
Yeah.
What's your feeling about casting? Obviously, I think most of us here have had a try at casting, and we all know that it is very intense, and it is very hard to focus on everything that is happening at the same time, trying to keep your head straight, remember what's happened already, what's still coming, keep track of the decks, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Tell us what do you think about this?
I mean, I think that when you get casting coming from a pro player as somebody who's probably been at the top of the ladder, or at least had been able to compete on the pro ladder, you're gonna get that analysis that is really top like 0.000 like percent, whatever it is, of people that really kind of have that hands-on experience. So the amount of people that actually are able to do that is very probably low in the first place. So being able to get that sort of analysis on a cast is really good as well, because it balances out perhaps another caster, maybe somebody like me who's probably more on the entertainment side of it, trying to make sure that everybody kind of understands what's going on, and making sure that everybody understands kind of what can happen just mechanically, just as like a kind of a base foundation of knowledge that everybody watching should either know or be reminded of. Format reminders, if a decision was being made based on what the players know outside of things. And of course, I do play Gwent, and I do know how to play Gwent, so I do have that, but I don't have the top of the pro ladder level of analysis. And someone like Panda is probably closer if you're looking at the caster team, because he's qualified for tournaments, won tournaments, been a very good ladder player in the past as well. So we do have that on the team as well. And he puts a ton of behind the scenes work in, by the way. Panda does a lot of like research and stuff for previous tournaments and the results for that stuff too. So there's a lot of work that goes into casting behind the scenes, and we try to just make it look as good as possible during the game. So excitement is great, but the pro analysis is something that I think everybody appreciates.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, of course, we can't really talk about Red Dragon without talking about some of the technical problems that we had. Obviously, it's so hard when CDPR puts on these incredible events, and Wild Hunt has this huge team behind them as well, working so hard to make everything flow smoothly. It can be so hard to kind of live up to those expectations. But we spoke briefly. I'm sorry, I have to talk about it. We spoke briefly before the show about one particularly interesting part of the cast, which was when there was a short delay, and and we got to learn about why there was a delay. Namely that Coleman was in the bathroom. And
that
we
was
got
not necessary
that little insight. But I think that was pretty funny, and in the end it was everyone seemed to have a lot of fun anyway. So I think that's the most important thing. I think if anything, we all want to see more tournaments, not fewer. So I think the community really threw their support behind it. Is there anything, just before we move on, is there anything that you guys think could be done to make these kinds of tournaments happen more often? What steps can be taken to make it happen? Is it just a matter of like finding sponsors or getting money behind it, or is it just is it always going to be this thing that comes as a passion project?
I mean, anybody who's followed card games knows that community is probably like the biggest way that a professional scene and a competitive scene can really flourish. So to enable something that makes these easier to throw or easier to perhaps gain licensing for, or, being able to set up. I mean, like the thing is, like grassroots stuff is Hearthstone was really built from the ground up, and they did some stuff with like the Fireside Gathering stuff. Like they really wanted to put competitions and stuff in the hands of the community and actually like kind of promote that at a community level. So having tools in place to provide more community tournaments is really important, and an observer mode would help, I think, a lot.
That's what I was touching.
You don't really want to have, because one of the tournaments we didn't talk about was also Gwen Slam, crazy production for Gwen Slam as well. But again, there was a team of people behind that as well. So, the bar is set pretty high, I think, for community events. If you're looking at Gwen Slam, Wild Hunt, and Red Dragon specifically. But I think that's probably part of the criteria for licensing. And but I think that being able to put the competitive future in the hands of the community more, I don't think that would be a bad thing. I think a lot of people would appreciate that.
Gnurrgard, do you have any feelings on this? What would convince you to put on a community tournament if someone said put a community tournament on?
First of all, I would need money because
money.
That's definitely a big thing.
Okay.
I don't think I can host it here.
Good. So basically, if anyone out there has barrels of cash, we've all got our laptops open and ready. Okay, so let's move on to some viewer questions. So for those who don't know, we actually took viewer questions in advance. So we have the Team Aretuza public Discord. There's a link to it underneath the stream. If you go down, hang on. That way, you can see the link to the Team Aretuza Discord, and there is a channel there called GwenTalk, and you can ask your questions there. So we had some questions come up, so let's move into our first question, if we can. Here we go. Do you think the Winch nerf destroyed the only playable archetype Northern Realms had? So obviously we already spoke a little bit about this, but yeah, Northern Realms. What's the future of Northern Realms hold?
I think it still needs a bit of figuring out. People have always, like, Northern Realms doesn't have that staple leader that you just want to pick, like Brewer was before with Scoia'tael, that just always has this guaranteed buy. Northern Realms has multiple decent options. So it needs some more figure out time to say which is the best. And they might also just want to take a step back with this winch and leave Hanseld as is to have more different approaches available later on.
I mean, I think that, I just want to see more representation from all factions in tournaments and stuff like that. So, Northern Realms has been Hanseld for a long time. I mean, I know Freddie brought out of it like within like the last 10 tournaments or something like that. But Hanseld's generally been the leader that you expect of someone who's bringing Northern Realms, whereas Skellige and Nilfgaard can be up in the air. So I was hoping that the nerf would bring more representation for Northern Realms, but it seems like it just maybe made Northern Realms less likely to be brought to a tournament in general. And maybe when it is still brought to a tournament, it's going to be Hanseld anyway, but for different reasons.
I can't help but feel like if Winch had been nerfed but the Dun Banners weren't, I feel like maybe there'd be a chance. But I feel like if with the Dun Banners being nerfed and Winch being nerfed at the same time, it was almost just a little bit of overkill in a way. It kind of just moved it too far out of reach.
I mean, overkill. I don't know. I mean, it definitely killed an amount, but I don't know if it overkilled it. I think that Dun Banner and Winch were really hot spots for people.
I mean, people already experimented with non-banner lists, right?
That's true.
I mean, Tailbot Challenger 3, non-banner.
Yeah, were successful with it. I think the main problem is just that without Winch, you lower the power ceiling of Hanseld so much that, like, if you look at the competition, like Krach or let's say like everything Nilfgaard, that it's hard to compete there. But I still think like Hanseld, like my teammate Don Coro says, is mathematically the best leader in the game. And I think that still holds true. Like pulling 2 units out of your deck, it's still
it's
very
crazy.
strong tempo swing. And I think you can still build on it.
I mean, it's how much weaker is, like, when you look at Brewer being so strong for so long with the Barclay Cleaver, like it's just a high tempo play. I mean, it offers some removal as well, and it's obviously offering thinning, but Hanseld is as well. So Hanseld being able to put, if you can guarantee, like the high 20s in points if you're able to crew the right stuff and you actually get what you want to pull with Henselt. I mean, Brewer had it with consistency, but Henselt still has it with numbers. So it seems like playing Henselt early on in round one would be very similar to playing Brewer in the same way, just for like a big rush of points to hold the round.
Yeah, for example, like people are already like experimenting with how's it called, the 8-point card that gets +5 when it comes out of the deck.
The
Yeah,
Katrini
Katrini
Knights.
Knight.
Yeah, exactly. People already experiment with that as an opener, like just that into Henselt for like, huge tempo swing that the opponent can't keep up with.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is what McBeard put on with the consistency issue once again. Like Brewer could just always either put out Spy or put out the Barclay Cleaver, and you would always have 27 points. But it was already even hard to get off your Henselt against Alchemies before with the addition of wins. And right now, you don't even have the winch to have the 3 additional machines. So it can be hard to actually pull off your leader, and then you just have that 3-point nothingness, and that's a lot harder to do with other leaders.
Well, what I've found is that actually, if you run a way to draw Stennis reliably, and you build a deck that's machine, Stennis gives that extra 5 armor, which makes the machine very resilient. And I like playing Marching Order Stennis and no Reaver Scouts. Because I love like playing Stennis, decoying Stennis, rezzing Stennis. I just love that about Northern Realms. So I always try to build decks around this. So Stennis pulls out the Ballista, gets an extra 5 armor, or even a Siege Tower, which makes it almost unkillable by
Stennis
removal.
the Menace, yeah.
And then you can drop Henselt, and it's like fairly reliable. You're running Natalis, Marching Order Stennis gets that machine, Henselt. You can do that very reliably right now. It's just not quite the same as how Henselt used to function.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's move on to our second viewer question. Let's have a little look. Are there any off-meta decks which you think could still make a splash on the ladder? So we touched on this a little bit already, McBeard. But Gnurrgard, what do you think? Are there any? I know you have quite an opinion about the deck that's going to be that is already making a bit of a splash on the ladder. What do you think?
Well, first of all, it's for me. You already seen it at Red Dragon as Soldier Swarm Nilfgaard. It's making having great results. And there's a great matchup against Alchemy, almost like it's the win, some people say. Greatsword is also very manageable, and also you have a long round, so you have something that is good for you against Handbuff Nilfgaard. And then, like, if Handbuff Nilfgaard, and which already established itself as a tier 1 deck, and Soldier Swarm Nilfgaard, they are very well represented, then the Alchemy representation goes down a bit, and then there's a deck that is bad against Alchemy but good against Soldier Swarm and Handbuff, in my opinion, and that's also Nilfgaard Spice, which I would like to see making a comeback.
Yes.
Oh,
Handbuff Squirtle also not great against Alchemy, but very good against anything basically that you need. If it's a control matchup of any kind that's favorable, that deck is very strong.
I feel like I've seen a lot of 8th Nate control on the ladder so far, as well. So especially with the double artifact compression, and we've seen a deck come out recently as well. There's lots of this focus on hyper thinning and the double artifact compression, either for the soldiers or for great swords or the boats, or whichever way you want to look at it. What do you guys think about that deck?
I think it's always going to
played much of it.
I think it's always going to be hard for a control like in Gwent to be super consistent, just because of the answering type of gameplay. Decks like our Great Swords and Consume are so great because they just generate points no matter what your opponent does. But if your opponent knows that you're going to play a Scorch deck and knows that you have like 3 Scorches available to you, they can just play around it and make it actually break them, make it a lot worse for you than if you were just to play a simple solitaire deck.
Yeah, so the thing about Ethne Scorch that I don't like at all is that Ethne is your leader to get Scorch or artifact compression. It's like you are forced to use Ethne for control, and I think that's not how Ethne used to. It's like meant to work. I think Ethne is best in a deck like Hive King. Basically, if anyone saw the Hive King dwarf deck, like using Ethne for either a control option like Scorch or artifact compression, or for points like marching orders, reconnaissance, ale, so that you have the choice. Because control option have this thing where it says like diminishing returns. You scorch the highest unit, then you scorch the second highest unit, and then like the third highest unit is maybe 6 points. Then you get 6 point scorches off, which is nothing.
Yeah, nice. All right, let's move on to our final question. This is a fun one, if I remember correctly. what is your least favorite card in Gwent right now? And it's actually
Interesting
Marcus has
background.
been very good and changed it. But the actual question was, what's your least favorite card in Gwent right now, and why is it Sabbath? That was the original question. I'm just quoting it. But no, let's go with that one. What is your least favorite card in Gwent right now? Dutchboy.
It's kind of hard. I feel like it's not necessarily a card, more of the mechanic in that every like basically cycling thinning card that you don't draw immediately is just kind of annoying to me, because you just know that you're gonna draw it round 2. With like foglets or anything, you just know that it's gonna come out in the Frightener or the draw again, and it's kind of just off-putting. You start to get irritated from the card that's actually just amazing. It's basically free for 3 points and comes out of nowhere out of your deck for free thinning as well. But right now it's just kind of tilting, for me at least.
Mm-hmm. McBeard, you look very pensive.
I mean, mine's kind of a weird answer as well.
Alright.
I think my least favorite
Great.
card right now is Yavin, and I'll say why it's Yavin specifically. Because Yavin still gets buffed by Neophytes and by Yorveth and by not by Dragoons, but not by Dragoons. So the fact that Yavin, this seems like such a long-standing thing that Gwent has addressed over time with the way full test works, but not the way that Elder's Double Cross works. Although maybe that's okay, but
Yeah,
I think that buffing spies by accident or buffing spies as well. I mean, even we saw in Gwen Open Aguara buffing Yavin. I think that the fact that he attracts buffs for hand buff when they've clearly tried to stop hand buff, but it's been patches and patches and patches that Yavin can still attract buffs in Scoia'tael hand buff.
Mm-hmm.
That is my least favorite thing in Gwen, I think, right now. It's like a little tiny pet peeve that only comes from people who play hand buff for Reveal or Francesca weirdness on Scoia'tael. So that's me, though. I do that. I don't like it.
Gnurrgard?
Yeah, I think I have to go with Necker on this one.
Ah,
I think a
Good
lot of
answer.
people will hate me for this, but I think Necker is a card that belongs in closed beta. It's a closed beta card that we have right now in open beta right before homecoming. I think it doesn't really belong here.
All right,
Well,
great.
Breakable, right? It's just too breakable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like
Alright.
it was one of the relics of the old broken mechanics we had in closed beta, and it's like the only thing that's left from there.
So you just think it's time has come and gone.
Yeah, I mean he can have his months until homecoming, I think.
Oh, it's interesting.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up there. Thank you, everyone, for your lovely contributions today. Thank you, LB Dutchboy, for being co-host. Thank you, McBeard and Gnurrgard, for being on today.
Well,
And
thanks.
before we finish up, I do need to give a quick update. So a lot of people have been asking, and we can finally give you the information that the Aretuza meta snapshot has been released. So you can go to the Aretuza website. There will be a link, and you will be able to look at the meta snapshot tonight. So that's great news. We got that information right before the show aired, so I'm very happy to be able to announce that. The next show will be on the 25th of June, so in 2 weeks' time. This show will be every 2 weeks. Our guests will be Flake himself. We'll be talking a lot about Wild Hunt, what happened, what went down, but also we'll hopefully be joined by the winner or the runner-up of the tournament themselves. Obviously, given a lot of people are traveling on the Monday, we may or may not actually be able to get a hold of someone. So we'll see who it ends up being. So if you do have a question for Flake or for whoever ends up being our second guest, please do go to the Team Aretuza Discord and submit your questions in advance so you can be featured here on our lovely show. And that is it. So thank you to everyone. We also want to do a huge shout out again to Mark Theus, again to Henno, one of the organizers of Team Aretuza who helped bring this show together, but also to Team Nova for their help with us on creating the meta snapshot. So, and welcome Gnurrgard and Team Leviathan also to the team scene. So thank you everyone so much, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye.